I believe it's the A, one of the higher A's, but I'm not positive.
Are we talking about equal temperament here?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's talking about Pythagorean comma.
I'm talking about the Pythagorean tuning.
Yeah, specifically, it's called the Pythagorean comma, which you're right. Like doing the Pythagorean tuning, there's a spot where it's off. And again, I don't know that much about this. This shit really hurts my brain to think about. When you get the music theory with this and the ratios and stuff. Oh man, I don't understand though why the start on 120 was that 126. Like what? Why did it start there?
I think it's got to do with the practicality of being able to create sounds that are so low that it's almost inaudible to the human ear.
That's below 20 hertz, yeah.
So, like, when we're getting to 126 hertz, we're actually starting to hear the full sound. Maybe when you're going down lower there and you're hearing partial sound, and 20 hertz, like what you say, you're not hearing anything at all, right? So maybe it's got to do with that, because he started off with 27 hertz, which is just barely audible to the human ear. And from 20 hertz, he brought it up to 54 hertz, which is audible to the human ear, but there's a problem. And from there, he scaled it up to 108 hertz. And that, I think, was the point where the human ear started to actually get a sense of the hearing. And then these are based upon the solids. These are based upon geometry, right? So this is sacred geometry in action. Like, this is all based upon the mathematics of triangles. Ori, leave him alone. My Malamut's getting jealous of the little Pekingese coming to like cuddle by my feet. No, Ori. They're like children, hey. Come here. Come here, my big boy. So I think that like his entire system, from what I've been able to see, came out of him using triangles, and obviously Plato got the credit for the solids, but the solids also fit into these bandwidths. So it's just rather interesting that, you know, geometry does this. Yeah. And we would probably have to change our geometry if we were going to use a different system. Or do you think that's wrong?
You know, when it comes to the whole, you know, even temperament thing, when it comes to like the frequencies and, you know, 440 is not the true, you know, frequency. We need to do it to 432. That's nice and all, but just kind of like on a personal level, like I've heard music in the supposed correct temperament, and I don't like how it sounds. It seems like it's like when you tune things down like slightly a bit, it's like the tones, they seem duller. They don't seem to have the same sharpness and vividness. Is that because like my brain is like incorrectly, you know, understanding the music? Am I like not tuned in properly as my brain? And the other thing I also have to think about too when it comes to hearing music, like I noticed that depending upon like what time of day it is, or if I'm like, you know, sick or something like that, or if I got like an ear infection or something like that, you actually perceive music differently. Like sometimes when I wake up in like the morning, or some days where like music will sound like a semitone slightly pitched lower than usual, or sometimes it'll seem slightly pitched higher at some times. Like there's like, I can notice like slight semitone differences. Like if I feel like if I got like a lot of pressure in my ears, music will sound slightly higher toned, or as if I'm, you know, maybe I'm in a more relaxed state, it might sound slightly lower toned. So then you're thinking like, well, it's like, are we even all hearing the same exact thing? Or because our ears are sort of tuned differently, we're all hearing kind of slightly different variation on tunes? Because my ears, when it comes to like picking up tones, like I can hear it. So I can hear the difference because especially if you have like a keyboard and you got like the pitch blend feature, and you can get those like little microtones. So I don't know, like I understand like why people want to do the even temperament thing, because the math fits nicely, all the numbers kind of add up in sort of a magical way. But just from a pure subjective experience, I don't know, maybe I'm like somatically like brainwashed and I need to like retrain my ears or something. I don't know, but I feel like I vibe with how I hear music and the way it's toned currently. So I don't know, maybe I'm off.
Like the depth interval. Oh, go ahead, Franklin.
I just want to point out something to you. Do you like the song "Comfortably Numb" by Pink Floyd?
Yeah.
I'm not like, it's all right. I've never been like a go-to of mine, but not really my favorite Floyd song.
Look at that, for example, is tuned into 432 hertz. Metallica used to do 432 hertz.
Which era?
Phil Collins, Vanessa Mae, Enigma, Jeff Buckley, Michael Jackson.
I guess I would have to hear
these are examples of
examples.
432 hertz music. Jimi Hendrix.
I think it's a different feel.
I bet you Led Zeppelin.
I notice.
I will say that I do doubt some of them use 432. Though. I think some didn't. I don't know if Jackson did all the time. I don't know if some of them always did. Well, I know Hendrix did sometimes.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, when it comes to certain like tones, when I listen to them, if the tone seems slightly higher than normal, it seems like the emotion of that tone is exaggerated. Like if a tone is like a little bit higher than normal, it's almost like it's too happy or it's too sad. Whereas if the tone is slightly lower than it's supposed to be, it sounds like kind of like dull and not as vibrant and kind of like less colorful. It's like, so for me, when I listen to like music, it's like a tuning fork is when my body starts to like vibrate when just that right tone. Because sometimes there's certain songs where I'm like I'll play a YouTube of the video, and if it sounds like the pitch sounds slightly off, I don't get the same emotional resonance from the song. It creates a completely, maybe it's my synesthesia. That might be it.
Well, you're also not supposed to be like a lot of people will pitch shift a song down, and they'll shift the song afterwards from 440 to 432, and that doesn't work because you have to, before you'd record the song, you'd have to tune everything to 432 and go from there to the whole Pythagorean type of tuning if you want it to be that way. And a lot of people think you could just shift like a 440 song to 432, and it's not the same.
Yeah,
now I'm not saying that's going to make a difference in how you hear the song. You may still,
and plus with different like instruments and like the velocity of the tone, like tuning like a guitar versus like tuning a piano, you're probably not going to get exactly the same results.
Yeah, and when people just do the pitch shifting of the song or the frequency shifting of the song down, it kind of doesn't do that kind of warped. It gives it like a warped sort of sound often.
The way I see it really is like the way that before music has been changed, our food has been changed. And we know this. They talk about in the Bible is all about the milk and the honey. And for so long, it was all about the milk's so good for you. The milk's what you need. And then the milk was good for your body. It does a body good. And now we know the milk doesn't do a body good. And the milk doesn't help the bones at all. It actually does worse. It makes you more likely to have bone fractures in your life and hard times because the calcium in the milk's not bioavailable. So you got to think that like sometimes these changes that they do, they know how to find something that's not good for you, but tastes better than what is. They're going to give you food that tastes good. It's not healthy for you. They're going to give you music that sounds good. It's not harmonic for you. So I'm pretty sure they might have found these special foods that are able to sneak into the people's diet that they don't want, but that taste good to them, but they don't realize the effects. Like onions, for example, causes a brain fog. And
that even works for what I was just saying too, because it's like with that you have to go back to the source of whatever is causing the issue with the food to begin with to actually fix it. And some people may think they could just change one thing back over, kind of like people pitch shifting a 440 song down to 432 and thinking that makes it all of a sudden in some sort of sacred geometry of 432 hertz.
And for me,
really, they're just slowing it down.
And for me, having synesthesia, where I, associate color with sound. When you tune something to a lower tone, it not only changes the sound, but then the color of the song changes. And it's like, wait a minute, this song isn't this brilliant orange anymore that I'm used to hearing. It has like a different quality to it. And it's like not the same thing. And I think really it's kind of like, I think there's something very alienating about this whole notion that, oh, you're tuning into the wrong frequencies, even though in your heart, you really feel emotional, resonance to a song. It gets your goosebumps going. But nope, sorry, wrong temperament. You've been, brainwashed by the incorrect music, and your body's, and you think you're in harmony, but actually you're in disharmony. I just don't like that, man.
I do think though, like for example, Stairway to Heaven, just as an example. Now, if that song had been written in 440 and then played in 432, it would not have been the track that we know. Right? It was actually written in 432 hertz. That's the difference. What you're talking about is a track that's written in 440 hertz and someone picks up an instrument and tries to play it on 432 hertz. Well, it was written for 432 hertz. It's sort of like trying to run a piece of software that was written for a Mac on a Windows machine.
It's and I also think that's kind of where that comma that PK brought up, the Pythagorean comma, where there is that sort of semitone that's like a bit, I think it's a bit sharp or a bit flat. I'm not sure which one it is.
Yeah.
But that would affect the writing of the song, because then you're going to play that totally differently to make sure that harmonizes with whatever you're playing with if you're in 432.
It makes you write music differently. And I've noticed that I've been only writing music on 432 hertz now for a while. And my objective observations of the differences were, like you said, before I wrote on 432 hertz, my music felt like it was more amp. And when I started going into 432 hertz, it seemed like it was more calming. This is my personal experience of it. Like writing music in 432 hertz to me seems like more inner, peaceful, calm experience while I'm playing and writing. But if I'm writing it in 440, I feel more excited. And I think that maybe that is what the difference is. It's like the 440 hertz.
Maybe it's like I like the 440. Maybe it's like, you get to a certain frequency because it sounds, more exciting than when you hear it in 432. It's maybe it's, to some ears it's more dull. I think it's just really like, when it comes to, when it comes to like music and why everybody likes different kinds of music. There's like a certain reflection of like who you are and your soul. I think it's kind of like, if you think of your soul as a note or a frequency itself, and what the music that sounds good to you is the music that's harmonically resonant with your particular frequency. Like if I'm a middle C, I'm going to vibe with a D because that goes into a C major scale. But if I got a C and then like a C sharp comes my way, now it's going to sound dissonant. I'm not going to vibe with that. It's going to sound, like, so we think about it like, because like, I think it's like, it's such a weird thing, because you wonder, like, how some people say, like, how do you know I'm seeing the same red as you, or am I seeing the same orange, or what is orange to you actually blue to me? And I wonder if it's like kind of like that with notes and music. It's like, are we really hearing the same music, or are we hearing something different? I don't know, something.
Well, the interesting thing to think about with that is like the water experiments done by what's his name, the Japanese guy. And when he played the music for the water, and the water molecules really changed depending on what he played. And it was like, I think like metal was like really rough for, like rough patterns came, like, but no pattern, basically no pattern at all. The water was all scattered, like the screamo type of music he would play. Then he'd play classical music, or like.
But you have to wonder though, like if you like metal, would it change how the crystals form?
I don't know, but it's like, why is the water
worth investigating?
Yeah, this is good.
It's just interesting as to why would the water have a preference that he was using, unless he took it from a person. Like, you know what I mean? Because I don't know.
Maybe
the water is just sort of mirroring the frequency of the sound in the same way. It's like those things where you take like a sheet of like salt and you put on that, like when you put it on like a vibrating sort of like resonator plate. I don't know if it's like magnetic or not, and based on whatever frequency it is, it'll turn into different like spiral and like kaleidoscopic shapes, and the salt will sort of like conform around that. Maybe there's a similar principle with water and music. I'm not sure.
Well, and it's repeatable. That's the thing. So if we see like I guess like disorganization that isn't like doesn't fit around that golden ratio of beauty, then what does that mean for the individual? How does that frequency affect the individual? And I know there's obviously been studies done on this, and we know frequency affects us in both positive and negative ways, depending what the frequency is. And I'm sure Franklin could speak on that, like probably better than I can even.
We also have to consider, like, when people are put in like bad situations, they kind of develop like familiarity with it, and it becomes comfortable for them, like through Stockholm syndrome and things. So if you're comfortable eating like cheese and a lot of sugar all the time and stuff, and you're thinking about, I think I want to be healthy, and you try that other food, and it's like, what are they thinking? This is miserable. I can't even think about eating like this, and I need my cheese back. I feel like you may be really comfortable and gravitate towards something a lot and feel like it's really good for you, but it takes a little bit of a while to adjust to something else to see how it really affects you. And I think a lot of people will just push things unfamiliar away at first glance because it's just not something your body's familiar with yet either. But I think like if your body's used to building up a defense against like inharmonic sounds, like, or unharmonic sounds rather, and then you hear something harmonic, it might be hard for your body to back down its defenses and being able to like harmonize with that because you're so used to like protecting yourself from something. And then all of a sudden something's coming in and you might feel like you're just not used to it. And maybe you're not vibed up to be able to sync with it because you will align to disharmonic ways to protect yourself over time if you're put up against them.
That's very interesting. And that's something that I noticed, like just from channeling music in 432 hertz as opposed to 440 hertz. Was when I used to go into the trip of music, and they were both artistic, and they were both like, I wouldn't say like, the 440 hertz is bad, but there must be a reason why it was only in the 50s that there was the switch that was pushed on us. Mozart didn't see the need to change it, right? So we're listening to Mozart in 440. And as a child, I thought to myself, this doesn't seem right. Mozart wrote the music in 432 hertz. Why are we being forced to listen to Mozart's music in 440 hertz, equal temperament, when it was actually written to be performed in 432 hertz? Are they trying to hide something from us? This is what my and I like what you say, Indy, because you're completely right. We become accustomed to things. For example, if you're accustomed to eating sugar and you're diabetic and you stop eating sugar, you might actually get ill for a while, right? Like, so whatever we eat, we do get used to it, and our bodies and our consciousness and our minds get used to it. But it's a very interesting discussion. I don't quite understand what equal temperament means, other than they've tried to standardize everything in some way. But I can only say from the feeling of the difference. And I never understood why certain tracks I loved so much more than other tracks. And when I look back in history, I was like, wow, most of the tracks I really, really loved were like 432 hertz. And there's got to be a reason for that. Some part of me felt more peaceful when listening to that particular sound of music. And I mean, it's very interesting. How much of Metallica's music was done in 432 hertz? I'm curious to look this up because I have to know. I know that pretty much all of Mozart. What music of Metallica was recorded in 432 hertz? I think that would be quite telling because I'm betting that we can all relate to Metallica. Am I right?
For the most part. I like
Nothing
Metallica.
Else Matters, 432 hertz. Is that not one of the best songs they ever did, which was a ballad? Fade to Black, 432 hertz. So it's no wonder that the most melodic song that they ever wrote, which I would say is Nothing Else Matters. Is that a fair assessment of Metallica?
I wouldn't know. I don't think I'd know Metallica's discography enough to make that point.
Listen to the message of that song. Is it not the most of spiritual message that Metallica put into writing? When they're talking about like Nothing Else Matters, is that not the most divine message that they put into a track that probably was the most popular track that they ever wrote? Most people responded to it well. I'm just saying, like, if everybody loved that track so much, why did they love it so much? Why was that one of Metallica's signature tracks?
Sure. Are you guys familiar at all with a composer named Harry Partch? Have you ever heard of him? So he's a very interesting guy. He has a very different perspective on music. So basically, the history with this guy, he was like, well, first off, he was like a hobo for 10 years. And then basically what he did was he was like totally convinced that the 12-tone system, not only is that, he went even further. Instead of saying it's not just that it's 432 hertz to 440, he thought the 12-tone system was completely and totally arbitrary. So what he did was he actually invented all these different kind of like bizarre instruments out of stuff that he found out of the junkyard with all these different like tonal stuff, lots of different like glasses. And he actually invents like all these instruments with all these different like tone systems and stuff. And that's kind of like a really interesting thing. I also really like Sun Ra a lot, and he uses a lot of dissonance in his music. He was a jazz musician who was basically also an occultist and a mystic. He believed he was from the planet Saturn and that he was an alien come here to give us a message. And he created this cosmic music with all of this like this dissonance and this ugliness. But what I find is when you start listening to music that's really dissonant and ugly and weird, you start to notice harmonic relationships that you never like noticed before. And you're like, that there's one part here that actually sounds kind of cool. Like the dissonance does something with the harmony that I've never heard before. And almost like when you explore those weirder dissonant intervals, it's like you actually find new melody types and new kinds of harmony in a lot of ways. And so I think that you can also go the route that there's like the people in the sort of the microtonal community where they take the 12-tone system and they'll maybe chop it up into like 12 tones and they'll subdivide them into like 100 tones. So it'll be like 120 tones per octave. And it's fascinating. You can get a lot of different like emotional kind of resonance from it. There's this one YouTube channel called this lady Dolores Catharino. She does these. He has this piano that's like this like hexagon square. So it's like there's notes that are vertical and horizontal. But some of the tones she creates with these microtonal harmonies are just totally gorgeous sounding. It's like and just very otherworldly and pretty. And you realize even when you get beyond that 12-tone system. So I guess, when it comes to the whole 432, 440, I guess it's kind of like an aesthetic choice. If you're trying to express a certain type of feeling, a certain type of mood, I guess maybe you could make the argument that if you want something to sound more calm, something more, peaceful, that maybe toning it to a slightly lower tone would help to achieve that effect. Whereas if you want to make something more exciting, punchy, in your face and noticeable, you tone it slightly higher. to give it that kind of a little bit of a sharpness to it. And it's interesting too, when we come to pianos, we call them sharp and flat. See, when a note is flat, it sounds it's flat, it's dull, but when it's sharp, it's sharp, it's piercing because it seems sort of high. And maybe it's like when it comes to like how we tone it, I guess if you think about it in the 1950s, I guess you could think maybe the reason they changed it is probably because they figured maybe, you know, people, it's like they kind of like you can sink the hooks in deeper with 440 hertz. You can kind of get like more of a reaction and more of a noticeable thing. But then thinking about like Harry Partch and people like Captain Beefheart and Zappa, and so a lot of people, you know, they're saying like, oh my God, dissonance is so ugly and serious. I think if you explore dissonance though, you'll find forms of harmony and beauty that you never know existed. It's like there's a little bit of gold nuggets hidden underneath the mud. And if you're only listening to just purely kind of melodic, peaceful, airy-fairy stuff, you know, there's some cool nuggets of gold that you might miss out on. That's why I kind of like, you know, I've always been someone who's loved weird, dissonant, strange music that's out there that kind of challenges the standard sort of like, you know, the standard wave stuff. Even with the music I do, I use a lot of dissonance in my music. I actually like kind of like the eeriness of the whole tone scale. It sounds like there's something kind of like, it gives me a weird giddy euphoria. I don't know, but I guess, you know, when it comes to music, you know, there is a, you know, a level of subjectivity, because I think it, you know, different people resonate from different things. But I never thought dissonance in music is always necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes I like it because it's like you feel like you're exploring an alien world when you listen to music that's more dissonant. It's like, ooh, look at all these, like, you know, these new plants and all these new things I've never seen before. So I don't know. I think sometimes like dissonance doesn't always have to be, or at least, you know, doing stuff that's not within standard notation doesn't always have to sound ugly. You can find you can sometimes create, you know, forms of otherworldly beauty with playing with weirder types of melodies and harmonies.
It's very interesting. Like I've just realized here that like you know, some of the classical artists, they used to tune their instruments into all sorts of things. 422, 421. And now I see that John Lennon sometimes tuned his instrument, and this is quite mind-blowing, to, was it 528 hertz? How's that? And now that's the third note of the solfeggio. Yeah.
I think with these tunings, like what we found, that I think a lot from the psychotronic sort of warfare and stuff like that, is that it really isn't the one frequency. It's more so combined frequencies, and the difference between two different, like the harmonic frequencies, as Cosmic was just saying. So like if you get someone with a delta wave, it's like the difference between two frequencies that are between 0.2 and 3 hertz. Theta 3 to 8 hertz, alpha 8 to 12 hertz, beta 12 to 27, and each of these sort of brainwave states have different effects on a portion of the population, and not the entire population is going to necessarily be affected by this every time they're subjected to it. So maybe it's more so 440 might not do anything different to anyone unless there's something within the 440 where there's two different frequencies being combined, but like say a subwoofer and some instrument being used that creates like a delta frequency or a theta frequency or a gamma frequency
effect.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's where you start to have issues, it seems, when you combine these higher and lower frequencies and they sort of cancel each other out and become a
dissonance,
like a beta or 12 to 40 hertz.
It's interesting that the dissonance of frequency combinations could cause some people damage and not others.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I have no idea why that is. And I
feel
know
like
that with
anxiety.
What'd you say?
I feel like it might have something to do with anxiety. Like some people are not very anxious, whereas other people are prone to being affected by things that cause anxiety and stuff.
Absolutely. It could be genetics. It could be, I mean, there's I'm sure a lot of reasons why that happens. I do know that with binaural beats, the way they work is that they'll give you something like 440 in one ear and 40 or not 440 in one ear and 400 in the other ear. That cancels out to be 40 hertz then. So that's a beta wave. Beta wave can, at high levels, give you anxiety. At low levels, like if you're getting hit with beta waves constantly, you can get anxiety. If you don't get it enough, you could have depression. So that's how that stuff sort of works. And I'm wondering if maybe that's why, maybe with any type of music, you could have this happen if the musician has the intent to do so.
I think there's a lot of other factors too. I think it's also sometimes the structure of the song, the tempo, how many notes are used, what kind of instruments. I think even there's kind of like a cultural sort of aspect too. You know, I think growing up as a kid, I was definitely not, you know, a popular kid, didn't really go to the parties, didn't really vibe with what was playing on, you know, MTV in school and stuff. And I always, in a weird way, it's like I felt dissonance from melodic music, because to me, like pop music kind of represented, you know, conformity, not being yourself, trying to be cool to fit in. And I think, you know, I'm a big fan of the rock band Primus, and they use a lot of dissonance in their music. And to me, it was like I felt like I harmonized with that dissonance, because it's almost like you kind of feel like the music, in a way, it's like you're an outsider and the other people are sort of like outsiders too. And it's like you feel like you share a bond there. It's like we're both kind of, there's a harmony in sharing dissonance with other people. If that makes any sense.
I will tell you something I learned from the great Alan Watt. Not that I disagree with him, but all of your dissonant cultural icons and the countercultural movements were created just like the mainstream cultural movements were. So the punks, all of us who thought we were punks, were never really.
Yeah. Are we losing him there?
Yeah, I think we might be losing him.
All right, he's back. We missed the last of what you said.
Oh, I was just saying, as like Alan Watt used to always say, like the countercultural movements were created just like the mainstream cultural movements. So even though we may have thought we were punks or some sort of underground movement that wasn't mainstream, we were just as programmable and programmed as the mainstream, because they set both sides of the equation up just like we do in every other aspect of culture. There is really no counterculture.
Michael Sarian talks a lot about that, how we just get these choices on a shelf and we think we're picking up something that's original, but it's really just one of the choices that's put in front of us.
Yeah.
It's something else in the crowd.
And then that's not to like disagree with what Cosmic was just saying. I think do whatever, like if you know yourself and do what feels best for you in a way that follows moral law and natural law, of course.
There's eccentric people that choose like different things, and that's how like those side tangents form. Like if somebody goes off to the side and chooses something that's going to liberate people and get them to like break away from civilization that's been established, they're going to probably create something similar to reel people back in. They've done this with a number of genres. When dubstep first came out in the electronic music genre, it was sweeping the globe, and it was like really calm and slow, kind of hard for a lot of the electronic music dance heads to follow, but it was able to do fusion with like all the different other genres, and it was really appealing to the mainstream. So they came in and they made it into this hard acid, crazy robot war sound, which has nothing to do with dub at all, and they completely sabotaged the entire genre. I wouldn't be surprised if they've done that with all kinds of different things in technology, in food and medicine.
It's like a form of parallel construction, like the they can do to set up someone like for a crime, where they build these two timelines next to each other. But it's like they deal with culture. They start building a parallel culture that's matching the counterculture, and then they take it over.
Yep, you're good at it.
Very good at it.
I think that we are completely stuck in the system where everything has been turned into a commodity that's financialized. So it's very difficult. You know, I was trying to figure out what the Grateful Dead were up to, right? Because there are very few bands that actually took a stance, right, against the financial system. And I think there's a really good reason for that. Yeah. I do find it interesting that some of John Lennon's music was tuned into 432 hertz, and some of his music was tuned into 528 hertz. And these are both Solfeggio points. Now, they found these instruments in the pyramids, didn't they? Or near the pyramids in ancient caves that were pitched to the Solfeggio 432 hertz and 528 hertz. You guys heard about that?
No, that's fascinating. Was that in the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens?
I'm not sure where. Let's take a look. Ancient instruments.
Was Imagine tuned to one of these frequencies?
Imagine.
Sorry, what was that?
Was John Lennon's song Imagine, was that tuned to one of these frequencies? Just because you get a certain message in that song that's sort of, it'd be interesting just to know which ones.
I'm gonna bet that it was Imagine,
but
Imagine might be 528. Thinking about it,
okay,
just by the feeling of it. But let's take a look. Imagine.
Remember we heard that. Remember when they all started singing that during the lockdowns? All the celebrities on X and or TikTok and stuff like that, and not TikTok, Twitter.
Imagine by John Lennon, double strung harp, 432 hertz.
So
there you go.
Basically, they weaponized
remix
frequency. They weaponized 432, knowing it'd be more.
John Lennon tune his guitar
because that song is like the
444 hertz, and A is equivalent to C at 528 hertz. So he sometimes used 444 and 528, sometimes 432. I think the original Imagine song is 432, but does it have a harp in the original song?
I actually don't know. I never saw him performing it like originally. I just heard it on the radio.
No, it is 432. Yep.
432, and I mean,
it's like strong feeling. Yeah, it's a very powerful song. It's kind of captured a lot of people.
You could take a message from that song in various ways. But the fact that they used it during the lockdowns and all the celebrities were singing it, that's kind of makes me feel like there's a certain intention behind it.
Yeah,
I think that's what you would do if you wanted to control people, right? You would take something that's so deeply programmed into the cultural unconscious. And so I think whichever track was like really deeply ingrained into the cultural unconscious, they would want to take that and use that and maybe add a video to it that causes you to interpret the meaning of the words in a particular way, if that makes sense. Because if you listen to the actual message of the song, like the way I think he intended it to be written, not the way it's been remixed, it seems like he's trying to tell us that, like, imagine, like, we didn't have borders,
which becomes a very globalist type of message,
or
and I know
anti-global.
or I mean, it could be anti-system, and I think he did express how, like, he thought we were run by psychopaths at some point in his career.
Then again, John Lennon kind of has a dodgy history, like,
with Crowley
hard
and whatnot.
Yeah, just because like he was like kind of abusive to Yoko. Apparently, like there's some darker stuff going on behind the scenes. So I don't know. It kind of like paints the picture for me a little differently in regards to that knowledge.
Also, I think he stole music from the guy that ended up killing him.
But we don't know that she wasn't a narcissist, because this is what narcissists do. They work under the cover of darkness, and they actually cause other people to react outwardly, but they're manipulating. So we can't really make an informed opinion about what was going on between John and Loco, if that makes sense, because we don't know the full story. But obviously, being a celebrity, he would have probably been a bit psychotic, right? Like, everybody's like, just like, can we kiss your ass, please? It's like, no, you must make a queue behind those 50 queues, you know? So that's going to get to you, right? It's going to get to you like, okay, these people are all here for me and they're clapping their hands for me. I must be important, you know? You're going to become a bit of a sociopath, probably. I don't know. One would, I think, if one was that popular. So he must have had some kind of psychological issues. But my gut always said to me that I wondered if she was his controller. I always had the impression that she was his handler.
Well, and remember, Crowley's hanging out with them all the time, and Crowley's controlling a bunch of people at that time, working for working for MI6.
Wait, with Crowley hanging out with the Beatles, but Crowley? No, wait.
You're talking about?
Are you talking about the Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts cover album cover where Crowley is on the cover?
You're talking about John D?
But Crowley hung out with them too.
But Crowley died in 1947, and I don't know if the Beatles were popular at then, so I don't think that adds up.
Was Crowley in MI6 or John D?
I'm almost positive
I think Crowley
with them.
Was in MI6.
Really?
John D is where we get 007 from, apparently. Like that was Elizabeth.
So John D is 43, and 43 is also 7. Like, he would use the number John, John as 4, D, Dee as 3, because he thought 43 was the perfect number because the quaternary hides the Trinity, basically.
And the 0 is for 2 eyes, only for secret eyes.
Yeah. I always thought that Paul McCartney came from a very old, well-established, upmarket family.
Yeah.
But he started MI6.
Like the Masons.
He's responsible for starting the intelligence agencies, MI6.
And my impression was that John Lennon came from a more poorer family. Is that correct?
I don't know about his family. Makes sense. He was definitely anti-establishment.
Paul McCartney came from like millionaire, rich, like up there, red carpet family. And John Lennon came from like a normal more working class kind of a family. That was always I don't know if it's accurate because I can't say I've really, but that was what my gut always gave me the impression. And Paul McCartney, I always had a feeling there was something about this guy I didn't like, and I could never put my finger on it.
And Cosmic, I think you're right. I think I was more so just thinking that they're for some, I don't know why I thought they hung out with. You're right. The timeline's off. They were definitely highly influenced.
They were influenced by Crowley for sure,
and Thelema, but not. Yeah, the timeline would have been off. I'm not sure if they had any interactions. Maybe they did at one point before Crowley died. Who knows?
Maybe. And Mick Jagger used to practice Crowley and X magic.
Guess who wrote the song Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band?
Who?
Paul McCartney. And that is the song about Aleister Crowley, about that mystical tradition. Now, Paul McCartney came from a family where I bet you Paul McCartney's father was a Grand Mason.
Yeah.
So Aleister Crowley, Paul McCartney's family. I wonder if Aleister Crowley knew Paul McCartney's father. Isn't that an interesting concept? Did Aleister Crowley know Paul McCartney's father? No, but it's basically Paul McCartney was interested in Crowley's writings. That's what we find out there.
A lot of the bands that time were influenced by Crowley. I know that Jim Morrison from the Doors, I think, was also really into Crowley as well.
Yeah.
Zeppelin too.
And the Golden Dawn, I think, stood for the drinking of urine in the morning at dawn. Just something I never really knew before, but there's a mystical aspect to that. Apparently, the process of alchemy and the creation of the philosopher's stone revolves around the purification of the life essence that comes from the urine, creating a stone with it. Now, of course, there's also the figurative aspect to that process.
No,
It's you know what's interesting too. Oh, sorry, my bad. Go ahead.
No, carry on.
I was just gonna say it's interesting too that you have Freder Akkad comes after Crowley, and he's the guy who does all he's like the reversal guy, like he reverses the numbers. He's into reversing just about everything in the system after Crowley, and then you have the reverse speech coming in the music of the Beatles. Like that those backtracked sort of messages that they started using.
Yeah, that's so cool. Creepy though.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I know you can play a record backwards if you take some duct tape and turn the needle over. You can play the record backwards, upside down.
Well, it seems like a lot of this stuff sort of came from Akkad, like in his that whole order that when he took it over from Crowley.
I had an old Queen tape I used to listen to, and somehow, while I was rewinding it, it flipped.
Whoa.
A kink formed in the thing, and accidentally I pushed play. This was when I was a kid, man. And I was blown away. I was like, you want me to do what?
Wow.
Who? Worship who? What? I didn't go in. You understand? I want you to understand that I didn't go in like to see what it was. I didn't have a preconceived notion in my head. I just expected to hear Queen, and I pushed play. And I was so like horrified by what I heard. I had to get my mates to come and listen to it and just say, just listen to it and tell me what you hear.
Whoa.
And they heard the same thing. I was like what the hell? They were like, what is this weird stuff? I was like, this is Queen backwards, dude.
Do you know which song it was?
To be honest, I doubt it was many years ago. I just remembered.
And
then I listened to a lot of those tracks because the whole thing flipped, man. Right? So like there was a whole lot of tracks you could listen to backwards.
Listening to singles, or was it just the album you was playing? A full album, you think?
Or I think it was Rhapsody.
Oh, yeah. Whoa. That's an intense song.
It could have been that track. It could have been one of those.
It already has like satanic reference though, even when it's not backmasters. This is that one part like Beelzebub. He mentions Beelzebub in that song. So
yeah. Good point.
Interesting. Well, I was just shocked because it was very it wasn't hidden. It was very obvious, and there was this like very hectic messages, and I was like how the hell did they do this? You know, like how do they make this happen? Is this just one of those convergence of consciousness expressing form? That if you're in a particular state of consciousness and you're speaking and your voice gets played backwards, like some secret intentions behind your words will be relayed, or was it calculated? You know, what do you guys think?
It's probably a little of both going on, I'm sure. I don't know what Queen's intention, but I know a lot of bands were doing it at that point, so maybe they were intentionally putting it in. But I know like with Stairway to Heaven, isn't that the song where there's a few verses where it sounds like when you play them backwards, like they're saying like follow Satan or something, and he's like, nah, we didn't. Like people just kind of heard that themselves. That wasn't supposed to be in there.
Well, we know that Jimmy Page was big into Aleister Crowley. You know that when I was in London last. Did I tell you this story that I actually stumbled onto Jimmy Page's house by accident?
Oh no!
So I'm walking down the road with my ex-wife, and I suddenly stop, and I'm like looking at this old house, and I'm like, my ex-wife is like, "What is it?" I'm saying, "Can you not feel the emanations coming out of this house? What the hell? What is this place?" So I start like really studying it, and I'm going, there's some really interesting old, like, you know, gargoyles and stuff. It's interesting now. Like, what am I feeling? What am I feeling? And I'm so like stunned by this. Anyway, I go to a place where there was a lady who I used to find her. I used to do scouting for people for films, for photo shoots, for adverts and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Casting. And for television, I did it for a little while, and I got to her, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "No, I'm shocked." And she was like, "Well, what's the matter?" I said, "Well, when I was walking down that road, there's this house that really I can't shake this house off my head. It's winding me up." And she asked me, she said, "Is it that house on that road?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Go look it up, go and see whose house that is." She said, "That's Jimmy Page's house." So I went to research, and I realized, Jimmy Page's, Aleister Crowley lived there before him. A classical composer lived there before him. So, and I'm telling you, the vibes that I got out of that house was dark.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it. I didn't know where I was. I was just walking, and I could feel this emanation. And I was like, ugh, what is this? I need to go home and shower, you know? So with Jimmy Page, like, I loved the music of Led Zeppelin, don't get me wrong, but you know, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Man, that's wild. No. When Aleister Crowley like channeled the angels or the alien Iwas.
Yeah, Iwas.
Did he do that in Egypt?
AI was.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Every time I see it, that's what I think.
What was this great spell that Aleister Crowley was supposed to do? And he went to this house in Wales. Was it Wales? He said it was in Wales.
Loch Ness. Loch Ness.
Oh, Loch Ness. Sorry, you're right.
He stopped doing it.
And he screwed it up.
He just stopped.
He belly flopped.
Yeah.
Played with big toys. He was like, "Oh, these toys are a bit big. Put them down," you know. So, you know, I think he thought he was a prophet.
Yeah.
You know, and then the reality dawned. Maybe he didn't realize how deep in the bucket he was.
To be fair, though, to Crowley, whatever you say about him, I feel like his Book of the Law does eerily predict the time we're living in right now, where it talks about, like, you know, everything, you know, descending into chaos and attacking like different idols and stuff. I feel like that's like, you know, with like all the craziness in our culture right now, it's definitely a reflection of that.
I would say even Kenneth Grant and God, like probably Kenneth Grant's work even more so. Like who came after Crowley. He was his what was he, his secretary at first, and then he was one of, he was involved with Thelema and whatever the hell else brotherhoods they were involved with, like outside the circles of time.
Yeah, he was really into like bringing Lovecraftian sort of lore into Thelema. He kind of like mixed those two, which I thought was always kind of interesting. I was fascinated by Lovecraft and all the worlds he created.
Some of the stuff that Grant's come up with, since like based on Occult and Crowley together, like is really predictive. It's insane.
You say his name was Kenneth Grant?
But yeah, but at the same time, it's you have to wonder, is it predictive, or is this the influence that they are, because they are also discussing actively in these books how they're working at like these spells to make
like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, like they're wanting the things they're discussing to happen, and they're working at that. I have a few of his books. If I could throw in the roundtable room for you guys if you want them.
Yeah. No, did he open up a gateway? Supposedly. And what did he offer in exchange for his communication or whatever gifts he received? Did he offer anything to Aiwass? Do you guys know?
Do you know which one he talked to first, Franklin? Was it Aiwass or Lamb? Or were they both the same?
Sorry, what was that? I need to turn my volume.
Did Crowley talk to Aiwass or Lamb first, or were they both supposedly in the end the same character?
I think Lamb, but to be honest, I think it was Lamb was the first one. I could be wrong.
So Lamb comes through.
Wasn't Lamb his own nickname? I think it was Aiwass. Maybe I could be wrong.
Because I thought one of them came through with his ex-wife. Apparently, I thought that was Lamb, and then Aiwass. Maybe did Aiwass come through when he was with his like boyfriend, not boyfriend, but the guy, whatever the hell he did to him in the desert.
That's how that's what I remember. He was with his wife originally.
Mm-hmm.
At that house, maybe in England.
No.
Where is he with his wife in Egypt already?
I don't know where they were, but
I think both times that this stuff happened, it was in Egypt.
Yeah,
but then I think he kept writing when he went back. Like it just kept happening. Right. He would get more and more.